Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, Group Chat. Do we have a special episode today? We are going to help you conquer your fear. There's going to be real life advice that you're going to walk away from this episode and be like, shit, I can do this stuff right now. And so we have a special guest, our dear friend Tariq Azim, releasing a book that he came to talk about. And more importantly, he's just an incredible story, incredible human being, a dear friend, someone that we've got to watch become now this incredible author. So we talked to him. We spend most of the episode talking to him. And so I hope you guys really dig into this and take away from it, because frankly, he's helped Anand and I in a lot of ways over the years. And we're kind of giving you access to our coach so that you guys can get access to him. And then we end the episode with winners, losers content. And yeah, that's it. Let's get into it.
I just want to add one thing. You know, when people ask me, describe Tariq, and you know, there's that saying, oh, he's built different. Like, they're actually talking about Tariq.
Yeah. Absolutely. He's one of a kind, and you guys all get to hear the story today. Let's get into it.
Cash.
Ladies and gentlemen, Group Chat.
Cash.
It's $1 trillion. Hot.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm going to tell you, this is going to be the episode, the best piece of content you're going to want to listen to start 2022. And it is with one of our close, dear friends, Tariq Azim. He's been on the podcast before. I think it was like 2 years ago. I don't remember what we were talking about when you first came on, but forget that. Right now, he's on because he wrote a book, and I would say this time next week, it could be a bestseller. It will be a bestseller.
Exactly. We're going to will it to be a bestseller.
There we go. There's no other option.
Right.
And so, welcome to the pod, Tariq.
Thank you, my man. So good to be back and see you boys again.
I think we've gotten a lot of new listeners since you were last on. And when you give your bio and background and all your accomplishments, I think it'll set the stage, and then we could take the conversation from there.
Yeah, before we even get there, just to give people background, I met Tariq, I don't know, how many years ago? Was that 12, 13 years ago?
Almost 15, yeah.
15 years ago. And people always talk about, like, how do you know everybody? How do you have such an insane network? I'll share this story, and you can, this is credit to both of us for keeping the relationship going. But 15 years ago, we did a pop-up in Union Square in San Francisco. And it was a 5-4 pop-up. We literally passed flyers out all over town. We had people who were local, kind of fans of the brand, kind of get people to hype it up, rented a space. We were out in San Francisco for a few days. We drove a U-Haul up and set up shop. And, we're sitting there selling clothes all day, every day. Did okay. And then one day, Tariq walked in with, I believe, a mutual friend of ours, or friend of a friend, and who kind of turned you on. And you walked in, and you were just looking at clothes, and I think I said hello to you. And I don't know how we got started talking, but we got started talking.
Right.
And I remember vividly, like, I asked a question like, what do you do? Or, what are you up to? And you made a comment about, I'm going to bring world peace. And I was like, oh, great. One of these guys, fucking hippie dippy guy that I got stuck with, probably goes to Berkeley talking about world peace. I mean, give me a break. And we ended up talking, I think, at the pop-up for quite a long time. And then you invited me to go to dinner, I think, or breakfast the next day.
Went to breakfast, yeah, Rose's Cafe.
Yes. And we went in San Francisco, had breakfast. And we had this insane conversation just about life, and we were both very early in our careers then. I was just, a few years into 5-4, just starting to see a little bit of success. We'll give you your background, but you're kind of, emerging in your career as well. And, it's one of those kind of serendipitous meetings you have, and you don't know what will come of it. And we've never really done business together. We've just maintained a friendship.
Yeah.
You, your brother, your friends, me, my brother, and our friends. And, I don't know. I feel like we're always been so close, yet we've hardly spent time together.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting when a lot of people ask, how do you know these guys? And the easiest way for me to explain, I go, we came up together.
Yeah.
Because we're really at that point together when we all had this idea around our perspectives and kind of our methods on how we want to, conquer the industry or the sector we want to pursue. And it was just one of those relationships where you just had that friend that would just say, I believe in you. And through each other's work, I remember every time we would talk, we'd have a very subconscious conversation about our like weekly successes or our monthly successes, just to kind of one up one another. Like, hey, I'm pushing and you pushing.
Yeah.
And that's why I always refer to us. I just say, look, we just came up together.
Definitely feels like that. And, even though, when I was in San Francisco, we'd spend time at your gym and you would always host us and always be incredibly generous with your time. And then vice versa, if you were down here and we were able to spend time with you, we were able to build this really interesting relationship. And I think one of the things that I love about our relationship is really just, I think since there's nothing, it's a true, genuine friendship and relationship because our networks are open to each other. We can, anything we want to accomplish within our networks, we're so open and so supportive. And I think what's exciting about what you're going to come and talk to us about today is like all of your life lessons are now finally in a piece of material that I think is going to be very, very powerful. To give people background, like, before you go into your personal background, Tarek kind of has built this insane clientele up north for, I would say, physical and mental kind of fitness. And one of the things I'm so blown away. So I used to go spend time at his gym. Like if I was in San Francisco, that was my office. I'd sit there, work, whatever. And you're seeing the people walk in this gym. It's called Empower. And you're just like, holy shit, this is like who's who of not just sports and fitness, but finance, technology. And you're blown away at the people walking in and out of it. And I remember my wife actually came up and spent time with you guys for a few days. And one of the things you would do is this thing called the game plan, where you really kind of, break people down and then build them back up. And I think it was really interesting to see that this was 10 plus years ago. We were talking about mental toughness, mental health. And before it became cool to just talk about it, like you were already on that stuff. And I'll be honest, when I first saw it, I think I was at a phase in my life where I was like, felt invincible. So I was like, I don't marry fucking mental toughness. Like nothing can bother me. Right. And that was like the phase of life that I was at. And I didn't appreciate and understand what you were building. And to see it come full force, like you've been spending your entire career in something that's like clearly a need, but no one else really saw it 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We do call it mental health, mental this, mental that. But at the end of the day, I always felt there was this massive disconnect between the impact and the efficacy of what we do physically and where we're deficient mentally. And it's funny that there's always this massive separation between the two, when in reality it isn't. Like you're literally doing things mentally and emotionally while you're physically active, but we never really bring much consciousness to how mentally tough we are. Because think about the amount of working out you guys do. Think about your runs. Think about, Anand joined our entire, our training camp last couple of years in a row for the NFL, our off-season stuff. Like you're physically, I'm putting you in a very, very uncomfortable state, and you're consistently capable of doing that. But then when something doesn't go your way emotionally, or when something kind of affects your head, you totally forget the resilience you have and you practice all day long.
Yeah.
Because we're simply just not bringing consciousness to the correlations between these two.
And so to that point, like, how do you come to that realization? Because you grew up, similar to us, immigrant family, kind of parents kind of sacrificed everything for you and your brother. And and your sister, and like, how did you guys, like, how did you grow up to even be aware? Because like, it's not common in an immigrant family to talk about anything mental.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, the root of this thing, which kind of is a good segue to share a bit about, kind of how I got here into this background was, coming here as a refugee. I wasn't born in the US either, right? My family left Afghanistan in 79. I was born in Germany in 82 in our whole little refugee compound, and worked our way to the US after a torturous process of trying to get in here. Our family finally got here. And, growing up, a lot of our life, we never really considered America home because our parents always thought like any minute Soviets and the communists are going to be annihilated by the Afghans, or we're going to return home next week, next month, next year. And as time went on, we're like, shit, man, it's been 12, 13 years we're here now. I don't think we're going anywhere.
Wow.
And at that point,
how old were you when you kind of had that realization?
Like 17.
Got it.
Like 17 is when I actually started to come up with the realization of like what is preventing me from really acting on things I feel I'm capable of doing, right? And I'd realized at that point that even our families, even our community, especially my parents alone, everybody's having a really hard time accepting the reality, right? It was like the fear of accepting the reality that like, this is home. Like, unfortunately, you're going to have to start all over fully. You're going to have to embrace, these different cultural codes. You're going to have to be okay to all this, all these differences here, from colors of people to religion choices to, everything. And I knew there was just this massive battle, and there's so much mental health and emotional, both mental and emotional health deficiencies amongst our community. And I grew up around that, right? Like, you already know what the story was in my own home with my father's illness and, my mother's illness with all the PTSD. And, I spent the majority of my youth in insane asylums and psych wards on our breaks. Like, we didn't have summer camps. We didn't have, soccer clubs we were a part of or basketball teams we were on. And like, our parents just driving us around weekend to weekend, all these different things were involved in. Ours was literally aiding bedside to our sick parents. And when you ask how you got to this, was like, I had to grow up fast, young. And my sister as well. My sister was like a second mom. And Yosef, which is my younger brother, same thing. Like, every time we meet anyone new and have even as our childhood, people, you guys are such old souls. Yeah. And I'm like, well, no, we just had to grow up really young because we didn't want to look at our parents the way we were looking at them anymore. And we didn't want to be like that. And that's where I just really was on a massive, and I still am till this day, as you both know, since we talk all the time, I'm just in this massive desperation of wanting to belong, and I see that quite a bit with a lot of our friends, where we push as hard as we do. And a lot of folks will point to us and say, oh, you guys are just such workaholics. Do you guys ever stop? But I don't think people know subconsciously, like, there's no amount of money or titles or association that's ever going to allow anybody who is seeking and fiending to belong to slow down. Like, there's never enough work you can do.
Yeah.
But that could also be unhealthy if you're not mindful of it, and I learned that the hard way, obviously. And I was about 17 years old when I just like, oh, what is it that's preventing me from actually convicting to like, take the steps of what it takes to belong? And I was all over the place. I mean, if you think I'm scatterbrained now, and I do a lot now, at 17, I think I was way worse because there was no discipline with my thoughts. It was just do everything, anything. And, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I wanted to be a jet fighter. I wanted to do whatever it is I could. And why I chose those very extreme capabilities is because of who my grandfathers were. I grew up never having the opportunity to meet my grandfathers, right? My maternal grandfather was the most decorated general and first jet fighter in the history of the country. Housed and guarded in Bagram Air Force Base. That was the big American hub. Yeah. He got taken away for questioning one day by the communists and never returned. Got executed, Paternal grandfather passed when my father was very young, but he led the war between Afghanistan and Pakistan to fight for the freedom of the people of the region of Pashtunistan. But he did it without an ounce of blood being shed. He did it through the power of language and communication. So my whole life, I always had these two figures I never had the privilege of meeting, but only get to fantasize about. But what intrigued me so much about them was that they made not normality safe. And I know for years you've seen my hashtags. And I know Dee always busts my ass for not being on social media enough. But when I do post, it's always hashtag not normal. And that actually comes from that. So for a lot of folks in my community and my difference back in those days, I mean, this whole new generation of Afghans nowadays are relentless. Everyone's pursuing everything. But for my generation, like little first breed of refugees, they wouldn't take some of these steps that I would take because they also didn't have a family legacy to kind of resort to and refer to and have confidence
What was that slogan you said? I thought it was really powerful. Not normal is, you said the way your grandparents.
Oh, my grandfather's made being not normal safe.
Got it. Yeah.
Right? Like I
think that's an amazing tagline.
And I think there's a massive consistency around like the excuse of risk. You feel me? Like risk is a reason on why I'm not going to do something. And obviously just led to more and more and more. And long story short, what I realized, Dee, was it was the fear, right? It was the fear of the unknown that was preventing kind of like my surroundings and even myself from actually pursuing things. And I was 17 years old and I said, well, shit, if I want to belong, then I need to do the things that help you belong. And obviously at 16, 17, 18 years old at that time, being in high school, the only opportunity I had to at least have a seat at that localized table was sports. And I was like, okay, like I need to push I play soccer, I'm going to play football. And I was playing football, but I really hadn't taken football so spiritual. You feel me? I took it like just to be a part of something, but it didn't. And obviously at that age, if I talked to anybody about what I was feeling, they would have thought I was nuts. But I just said, I don't know, I just had this massive conviction, like, look, football is going to be your freedom. And why it was my freedom was it exposed me to so many different things, right? Like, you got the pasta feeds every Thursday night at your teammates' homes, and every week it's a new home. So you get to go see how these white American families like live. And you wouldn't see some of the stuff you'd see in their homes in an Afghan home or a Muslim home, but you're almost like forced to embrace it. You're forced to accept it versus judging it and being all worried about being there.
Yeah.
And then my African American friends, my Polynesian friends, my Mexican friends, like every week it was somewhere different. But what that did, man, it started stimulating more capabilities. Like, holy shit, I took this risk of actually pursuing this thing and being a part of it and being okay with any sort of embarrassment that might come, meaning like might get flat backed. I might miss a tackle. I might, be that guy that might wear my cup on the wrong side. Like, Yeah. And I got a taste of actually pursuing something to belong and taking what comes with it. And then I just started pursuing other things that Afghan refugee kids just weren't doing. I student body, became president of my school, like all these other things. And very young, like I'm saying those little, for as stupid as it sounds sometimes now, but those were such crucial steps to take, were those little things that again, like I said, most would refer to them as like, oh, the stupid thing was really that big of a deal. It's changed my life. Yeah. High school football changed my life. Student body changed my life. Why? Yeah. It opened my eyes to embrace things outside of my control very young.
And so that led you to go to college. Did you think you were going to go to college? And did you think you were going to play in college?
I never, I always, again, I'd have these things in the back of my head, but I would never share them because I'd always become and get embarrassed. Like, people would laugh at me, what are you thinking? And between my junior and senior year, I made a really aggressive commitment about, like, I'm going to put on some size, I'm going to ball out of control, I'm going to prove to everybody I'm the best athlete on the team. I just wasn't getting the shot. I wasn't getting the nudge from the coaches. Why? My parents, again, as I alluded to earlier, there's a system that goes into play here with like, I was wondering how all these parents had these like fantastic relationships with our coaches and going to bars with them and like they were working the coaches for their kids.
Right.
Yeah.
I just never knew that stuff. Obviously now all my friends have kids. We're a lot older now. I see that and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I know how to play the game. My parents had no idea.
Yeah.
So, we were just solo nomads, like trying to figure it all out. And I knew the only option I had was ball out. Be different, be not normal.
Yeah. And
in my senior year, I balled out of control. I played everywhere. Outside backer, defensive end, kicker, punter, wing back, tight end. And I had the most sacks. I had like 16 sacks that season. I don't know if anyone still has, broken that in our league from where I'm from. But at that point, I was like, oh my God, I could play. And I knew I could play because a ton of my teammates were actually getting letters from everywhere. And I just didn't understand why. Because obviously internally, like staring at them, like, man, I'm so much better of an athlete than you.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have that privileged plug, you know? And I actually went to the recruiting center and I was like, I'm going to the military. Like, I want to be a SEAL. I want to be, Air Force Special Operations. Air Force because of my grandfather. SEAL because I was like, this is the only thing that could really push me into not normality. Yeah. And Mike Darr, one of the most renowned, winningest junior college coaches on the planet, and Ed Hall, who's a Bay Area football legend, the former linebacker coach at Cal, had reached out to me because of my performances my senior year. And he said, hey, we got some word. You're thinking about going to the military. Why not football? I said, oh man, no one's looking at me for football. I got no chance anywhere. He said, you can go D1. And I was like, well, what'd you just say? He said, you could play college ball. And I'm not even talking D3, D2. I'm saying D1. You just got to come under my eye for a season. And I said, what's that look like? So he invited me to this local JC, Los Madonnas College in Pittsburgh. Wow. And myself and two of my teammates, David Tollefson, if you remember him, played for the Giants. Yeah. So David and I and Sione and John C., we all four of us were the four horsemen. And we just said, like, David was 1 year older. He took a year off of football after high school. So we all pursued it together and said, man, let's put our trust in these three coaches and see what they do for us. And all three of us went to Division I institutions after, a season and a half at a JC. Wow. And I got to Fresno State.
That's amazing. And I remember, obviously playing college sports is like such an elite thing. How much did that have an impact on kind of your next step? Because I think kind of where you ended up is interesting because, I think as an athlete, it's really hard to ever leave your sport or leave sports, period. Like, think about all the stuff you're involved with. You're still in sports to this day. Yeah. Which is pretty crazy. Like, do you feel like once you become an athlete at that level, you just can't walk away? It's like addicting.
I think it only becomes addicting because you actually understand its value to your soul. Yeah. Like it's a massive, massive part of my identity. Yeah. Right. It's my safe place. It's where I know in that community, I've got people who could comprehend what I'm laying down. I feel eye to eye, not that I'm ever above or below anyone. I just feel eye to eye with very, very deep philosophical understandings when it comes down to so much of my life, which has been like, I don't know how to operate without being in pain. Yeah. And that's what I learned very young because the best rewards always came when I hurt the most. And why I got to keep my hand and my foot in that door of athletics and physical activity and team and community is because it's the only thing that keeps leading me to these outcomes that nothing would ever get you to unless you get your ass beat inside out.
So how did you end up back in Afghanistan? Because I've seen the footage. You sent me pictures. We watched some stuff. It is wild, like what you kind of experienced because, I think I called you maybe a year ago when everything was happening. Yeah. Or was it was this year?
This summer, yeah.
Yeah. When everything was happening in Afghanistan, you probably have the most insight more than anyone because in, I think, what was it, like 2004 you went back?
Yeah. 2004 was right when I had graduated from Fresno State. I really wanted to pursue a career, obviously, in the National Football League. Again, just to pursue it. I wasn't relevant at all to any team whatsoever. But again, very similar to high school, my teammates that were going into the league, I was like, okay, like just like high school, I was like, if they're even relevant, imagine if I had exposure, what would happen? Yep. Yep. And I was really aggressively pursuing, trying to find a way into the league. And I knew the pro days at our institution, at our colleges were just kind of like the localized combines. So everyone who thinks they have a shot should come in there and you perform and become relevant. And that's what I was banking on trying to do. Like go there, put out a badass 40, put out my reps on my 225, show my footwork, show my agility, and I'll go. And as you remember, about 4 weeks before the end of my senior season, I blew out a few discs in my spine. When I left playing linebacker and moved to fullback for that Colorado State game. And when that happened, I ended up having that back surgery. Obviously, it was a small discectomy. I knew I could make a comeback off of it, and I started training again, lifting again, and this big family situation started to surface towards the end of my senior year in college. And I was at that point in my life, man, where I had to really make a decision. Because if you think about so much of what gave me the motivation to, again, play high school football, win a state championship with our team, become a Division I athlete, be a ASB president, have these types of associations and networks that I had. Those all came because deep rooted was that family story. It was like who my grandfathers were, what my parents went through to get us there. And this really interesting thing happened my senior year of college where I was like, okay, good, football is going to be the thing that's going to take my family off of welfare. It's going to take my family off of Section 8. Like, no more food stamps, no more embarrassment at the grocery store. Like, it's time, baby. Like,
yeah.
And I'm buying some rims. Like, that whole entire mentality. And God knew, man. Like, the only reason I wanted to get into the league was because I always wanted to share that mentality. I wanted a platform to share the mentality how sport and physical activity can actually be the reconciliation tool for peace. Always. Because what it did for me internally, right? When folks talk about peace, they always think of peace means like kumbaya, sit in a circle, pet animals, like, oh, it's peace. No, like, peace is internal, right? Peace is that fight. When I talk about peace, I'm not talking about the people, yourself, us, because it takes us in order to create that, the optic, the outcome. In my senior year, this big family situation surfaced, and I really had to make a decision between my ego and my responsibility to my family and the legacy, right? The deep, unknown, motivated factor that no one knew, but I knew. And I'd actually just made a decision, like, I need to go. It's my dad. Like, I'm the oldest son. And it was my first time ever, By the way, I was born in Germany, right? I came to the U.S. as a refugee from there. So it was my first time going to Afghanistan was in May 26th of 2004. And I went there for obviously a pretty brutal, disappointing, family situation. You guys know how that gets with immigrant families and land disputes, and it all ends up being your own family, and it's just all disappointing because you're just really not used to all this. So I went there hot. I went there like, okay, I have no problem going there and be relentless. Like, anyone who puts my father, the sweetest, kindest, gem on the planet in this state, like, deserves to be slapped.
In 2004, this is in the middle of a war.
It was the worst period. Yeah,
right. So it's like 3 years after 9/11, and the U.S. is set up fully in Afghanistan.
Yeah. The U.S. All NATO, all ISAF, it was 20 something different countries present there at that time. But 2001, 2003, 2004 is like 4 is when it started really going. Like 1 to 3 was good. It was development. It was quiet. It was calm. 04, 05, 06 on is when you'd wake up every single morning to a suicide bomb. And in 04, when I went, I went there for a pretty brutal situation with the family, and getting there was obviously extremely frustrating due to the circumstances, not knowing like what to prepare for. Like, I've never not had a shower. I've never not had running water. I've never not had electricity. So the circumstance situations were definite shock. But yeah, I ended up going there in 04 for that particular reason. And getting there, like I alluded to earlier, I went there for a very violent situation and was mentally prepared to like go out there and be that guy, right? Like, I'm a college football player. I've grown up doing martial arts. I've got cauliflower ear and I've got big neck. Like, come on. Just complete meathead mentality. And I actually got there after a pain in the ass of a travel schedule. There was no direct flights to Dubai at that time either from here. Now there's direct flights, but it was almost a 36-hour journey to get from San Francisco to Kabul of just nonstop travel and layover time. And then obviously seeing the lack of etiquette at the airport and in the airplane, like, you're just kind of like, it's just what is this? You know what I mean? Like, and I wrote this in the book actually too, right? Like, my experiences of like these individuals sitting in the airplane, sitting in the seats with their shoes off, Indian style, on top of the, chair, and then like spitting, chewing tobacco out on the carpet, and not moving out of their way for an older woman who's coming in. I just like, for me, it was like, this is so strange, but it also made me angry, and it just added to that anger of what I was entering the country with. And I actually got to that Kabul finally. My father was on the bottom of the runway with a few local tribal elders to greet me. And, I kind of come off the airplane. I see the circumstances and the situation of the country. I saw what I saw on the plane. It gave me a good 2.5, 3 hours to reflect a bit on what I was seeing. And I come off the airplane. I see my dad, and I got pretty, as you know, I'm not a very emotional dude, but I got pretty emotional when I saw him.
Yeah.
Seeing that, and I couldn't believe that I was in Afghanistan. Like, I've always just been like, oh my God, war, Afghanistan, fight, grandfather executed. Yeah. You caused my parents so much trauma and mental health issues. Like, first 12, 13 years of my life around these psych wards and then say, listen, it's all your fault. And I was very, very emotional with Afghanistan. But I also got extremely emotional, and it wasn't necessarily about my anger towards Afghanistan. When I actually got off the airplane in D, why I got so emotional, it was the first time in my life where I was actually disgusted with myself. And why I was disgusted with myself was I actually became extremely mindful of intention. Like the feeling of intention. Because I got off this airplane, college graduate, college football player, grown up in fantastic communities, great people, friends, electricity, light, kindness, community, like all these amazing attributes that could actually help save a nation. I had all these capabilities of living proof of living this. And I am this Afghan, Pashtun, American football. I'm like the golden child who can be like the guy who helps Afghanistan. And I came there with these disgusting intentions of adding to the blood. So that's why my dad, when he hugged me, he's like, you're safe here, don't worry. I was like, no, I'm not scared. I'm disappointed in myself. He said, why? I said, I just feel disgusted that I came here with this intention. And he said, well, you probably came here he literally says, you probably came here for a reason a lot bigger than you think you came here for. Like, tell me, like, you didn't come here for these land disputes. And I swear to God, like within 15 minutes between Kabul International Airport and where our home is on Chicken Street, I figured out my entire purpose in this world that I'm living today still. When you said, T, how after all these years you're still connected to sport? Well, right there, as I was driving through and I was looking at like what a shithole Afghanistan was and these circumstances and these people and these, babies in these laps of these beggars, like half dead, begging you for money. I made that decision right there. I said, holy shit, like I'm going to solve this issue around reconciling peace through the power of sport and physical activity. And I'm going to make Afghanistan my first case study to prove that. So I immediately changed the narrative and perspective and the intention of why I was in Afghanistan. Before I even got home and all the land disputes and the fights and all that stuff began, I had already created a purpose of why all that frustration is going to be worth it. You feel me? So we're battling the family, we're, sleepless nights or motherfucking each other, like all of that. It's fine. Why? Because it's for this bigger mission. Yeah. So I was like so blessed that my father's like little one-line comment right there within 10 minutes gave me what I'm living today. And it all started there with all these, peace and reconciliation movements around sports and the efficacy of sport. And I really do believe if it wasn't for that experience in Afghanistan, I would have never been relevant to you. I wouldn't have been relevant to what I do throughout the National Football League or the UFC or Silicon Valley or all these clients. And most importantly, now the book. Like none of this would have mattered if it wasn't for me making that decision of fulfilling the responsibility to something people can't see.
Yeah. And you did some pretty transformational things in Afghanistan while you were there. So, I mean, we know the story, but I think it'd be great for you to explain it.
Of course, man. I mean, it all started with I just wanted some engagement first because honestly, the most honest people in that country were everyone 12 years old and younger, right? And it's not the country's fault. The country froze 30-something years ago at that point, right? From education to spirituality to governance. It was 3 or 4 generations of just savagery was normal. So you couldn't blame them for being the way they are or even how they are today because they don't know any better. They don't have what you have here or what I have here. So the kids were kind of like immediate. And when I pulled up, all these kids came and swarmed the car. and throwing soccer balls at me like, oh, Pachaseb's son, like my father's son, you're a football player. And I was like, I kicked the ball away. I said, not that kind of football, American football. And they all started laughing. I said, I'm just kidding. Like I grew up playing soccer, like let's toy around. And I actually just started seeing, me relaying messages. Like every day I would just hang with these kids because it was the only piece I had. And I would just see how they would be absorbing information, not even technical information, but behavioral information, because they're just bad kids, right? So like cussing each other out, saying stuff like even our parents don't say, throwing stuff at each other. But after you just grab their hand and show them some direction, they'll never do it again. And that experience right there got really addicting, which I would say was the beginning of actually tasting coaching, right? Especially when the coaching is respected and embraced. And that kind of neighborhood program the street program turned into a neighborhood program. We developed all these little clubs in the neighborhood. We'd play against each other, and the winner would get ice cream, and it cost like 39 cents for 10 ice cream. So I was like, I'll fund it. Let's rock and roll. And that kind of slowly started to give me a bit of exposure, actually, to the sport infrastructure of Afghanistan. And with nothing going on in the Olympic Committee, but a really fantastic gentleman at that time was the president of the Olympic Committee. He was a very dear friend of my family's, and they fought against the Soviets together. He knew I was there. And when I went to meet with him, he, like, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing all this neighborhood stuff. He said, we're trying to rebuild our national program here. And there's a women's program going on. I said, what? He said, yeah. And I laughed about it. So, I actually started a little women's program in my neighborhood. He said, yeah, I do know that. That's why I just brought that up to you. So he ended up connecting me with the gentleman who was actually leading this initiative, was a former Afghan, soccer star there. And I kind of assisted and helped his women's program. And then a handful of nonprofit organizations were coming through the years, obviously to leverage, these types of programs as PR publicity stunts for their organizations and stuff. And people in Afghanistan were getting pretty fed up with it. Like, look, all these people are coming and taking our story and sharing our story, and nothing's happening for the girls and nothing's happening for the programs. And I said, okay, we'll see what's up. And another big group came in, and this one group came in and actually brought global relevance to the program. And it was a group that actually submitted their story and film to the ESPYs. And in 2006, our women's soccer program were recipients of the Arthur Ashe Award at the ESPYs. And so our whole team kind of got invited to that, and I got exposure to that whole community in 06. And I actually went to the ESPYs one time in 2002, 2003 with Diego.
Okay.
He snuck me in. We both snuck in as seat fillers. And he can't speak a lick of Spanish, but the lady was coordinated, spoke Spanish, and whatever it is he said, it worked. And he took me up. We were the last seat in the auditorium at the Kodak Center, behind the big camera. Like, we were the seat fillers of that seat. And I'll never forget in 03, 02, 03, he said to me, one day you need to be on that stage. 2006, our soccer program was the main feature of the night. And again, I was like, holy shit. Like, in my head, it hit me. I was like, oh my God, that intention thing is real, even when you don't even think about it. And when I went to the ESPYs and I saw the situation, the circumstances of how the reception of people and how emotional they were about Afghanistan, it really turned me on to doing something much bigger. And it wasn't necessarily about building a sports program or trying to create any fighters, but it was really about, again, wanting to prove the power of sport and how sport could help expose the true identity of a nation. And, I had a ton of friends that I'd always talk to and say, hey, listen, you got to come to Afghanistan. You have to help with this, you help with that. And everyone's thing was, anything CNN or BBC or any of these news stations were saying was accurate. And I'm like, that's not true. I wouldn't be here at the age of 22, 23, 24 if there wasn't really an opportunity to do some interesting things. Oh, no, women are oppressed and the Taliban are in control and, nothing's going to happen. And I was like, man, what do I do? What do I do to prove to the world that Afghanistan is ready for social change? And what can I do that isn't political or going to be stopped because people are going to be threatened by what I'm doing? And I knew if I were to even try to submit for a fund anywhere, that I'd bring attention to it because I'd have to explain it. I knew if I were to promote it before I did it and try to get, support, fundraising, whatever it may be, I'd be screwed. And at that point, I was like, holy shit, I got an idea. And it was right at the ESPYs, because during soccer practices prior to the ESPYs with these girls, I'd always shadow box. And I'd always see them stare at me like, what are you doing, coach? And then like we would start utilizing like, combat stuff for warm-ups just to kind of see what's up. So I planted like a seed of just awareness subconsciously. And right after the ESPYs, I went back to Afghanistan, and that's when I decided to launch the Afghan Women's Boxing Federation. And again, I didn't launch that program to create any world champions or any fighters. I launched that program to prove to the world that Afghanistan was ready for social change by me having this like small cohort of girls who are willing to step up and prove that we should be involved in male-dominated roles in society because we're doing the most male-dominated activity known to mankind. But we had to make that program official, right? Like I had to get that thing to be something the government supported, and it became a federation of its own. And that's when I then got exposed, where I'm hoping a lot of young entrepreneurs think about this, trusting and understanding the value of transparent communication. There's so much respect in that mentality and that approach. And when I was started to share what I was doing, everybody told me I was crazy. A handful of people would tell me, take your American ways and go back. Like this women's boxing in Afghanistan, you're out of your mind. And I said, well, what would stop me? And they just gave me a list of names of, obviously in America, they'll call them warlords, but in Afghanistan, you call them tribal elders. And it was a handful of these types of individuals. And then got obviously had the privilege of meeting a handful of them, kind of sharing with them what my perspective was, why I thought this was important for the future of Afghanistan. Every single one of them that were supposed to behead me and skin me were the biggest supporters of me. One of them even said, get my daughters, they're like bag of potatoes. Like they don't do anything. Get them to box. And this is an individual that people assumed were the ones that would want to skin you and kill you for having women box in this country. And so anyways, I got all of that. And then the last one that was left was actually the Taliban. And at that time, the main communication source for that regime, this was post their activity, obviously, was a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Mutawakkil, who was the chief spokesperson and the foreign minister of their government. And he had just returned to Afghanistan from Guantanamo, and he was on house arrest, but obviously still had their communication lines going. And I ended up getting introduced to him, and I went to the compound he was out, about 25 minutes outside of Kabul, called Khushalmana, and pulled up on them, obviously scared shitless.
Yeah. I was going to say, what gave you the courage that you could go to the Taliban? Because you grew up here. Yeah. So you know the information that's fed here. Yeah. That you're like, I'm going to drive to the Taliban compound.
But you remember at this point now, I was there 3 years now.
Okay.
Right? And after 90 days in Afghanistan, you actually become a massive believer in destiny. Right? Like when it's your time, it's your time. Mm-hmm. Like there's no running from it. And if you live like that, there's no reason to live. Like I'm not going to allow any other man to dictate, my peace and my desires and my goals, because I had this rule in my head. So what can someone do to me that I can't do to them? Right? Like you're going to punch me, I'll punch you back. You'll shoot me, I'll shoot you back. And I just had that type of mentality there because you just have to, or you're going to get swallowed. And, years have passed, and I kind of built a bit of a brand and a name there too, because I was able to get my father's land back, and I won a lot of street cred because I chose to come back to the country to do that. I never got involved in any business there, so people knew my motives and my intentions were, like my mom would always say, like our family lays bricks, we don't take bricks. And so seeing him, I did have a lot of confidence in seeing him because, again, I trusted the intention. And I was super nervous, more about rejection than I was about being beheaded or killed or anything like that, Yeah. But obviously those thoughts do go through your mind because of their branding, right? And what they've done to people. But ended up having an opportunity to sit with them face to face. And I tell you, man, I was surprised with how receptive he actually was and how much he informed and educated me on why they even had that restrictive, oppressive perspective on women in the first place. Which obviously I don't support it because I come from here. But when you're there, you're like, oh, okay, I could see your position on that. But long story short, it took a good 3-hour conversation of just hangout time to where he fully endorsed my program. and said he'd actually like to come to the stadium and meet and greet these girls and tell them that we are your first line of security. This is very important for the future of Afghanistan. And when I got that program launched, I spent a little bit of time there to kind of just get off his feet, made it official as a federation. And at that time, I was like, 4 years of my life, I was like, okay, cool. Like I've done what I can to contribute to the Afghanistan, but I got to get back to my life building. Mm-hmm. In 08 and a half is when I kind of made a full-time move back to the US.
And I think it would be great to kind of really kind of dive into from the book, like purpose. Obviously, like your career after that really went into training, right? Like you did private training. You had a private training facility. You had a boxing gym. You were doing everything out of Empower.
Right.
And how would you describe Empower to people?
I didn't. I wouldn't, because people would easily just call it a gym. And I'm like, okay, I really never liked to explain it to anybody who didn't know about it from somebody. I mean, as you know, like we never marketed a day in our lives. A lot of our business was literally individuals were being like, it's different. Just trust me. Once you come, you'll understand. Yeah. And what it really was, it was just a big kids playground for all the not normal. Yeah. Right. It was where we would have, we'd understand the significance and the value, how sport can lower the waterline, how sport and physical activity exposes character. So what it did is actually it was like a social club. And as you know, I built several ventures out of that place, but almost used that more as a social club of having some of the biggest game changers of our society kind of show up there every day and meet, box, lift, grapple, but at the same time have really interesting conversations, have really interesting introductions. A handful of businesses were funded out of there. A handful of businesses were acquired out of there. All kinds of really interesting partnerships and collaborations began. But yeah, it was a training facility that we were, that we had going, but it was a training facility that was actually using training for something much deeper. And what was much deeper, which was being able to identify and build a case study around the most important thing to me, which has been my life study, is how people define fear. Because that was the consistent, the most consistent deficiency folks would almost fall victim to was fear. Like all 5,600 case studies, I call them, right? My game plans. Every single individual's biggest unknown and most uncomfortable thing was fear. And that would lead me to my question of like, great, like, what do you fear the most? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And what do you think everybody would say? Death, right? And I know when folks say death, then I'm like, okay, perfect. Empower is the perfect home for you. Yeah. Because the mentality at Empower was a little different with death, right? It was death isn't an unknown, and death isn't something you should fear, right? Death is actually the only guarantee, and death is the only thing you should prepare for. And the question was like, well, how do you prepare for death? And it was like, look, I'm not talking about your funerals. I'm not talking about the flowers you want or the food or the MC or any of that. When I talk about preparing for death, it's just realizing what it is you're taking to your grave, right? And every time you ask everybody, out of everything you've accumulated in your life and all the things that you're doing, what do you take to your grave? What do you think everybody says?
Their watch.
Right. What else? Yeah.
Memories.
They'll say nothing.
Really?
Nothing. Because what it is that when you ask people what you have, people always think it's a thing. It's a material. Yeah. People don't understand that these materials actually lead to something called feelings. That material is giving you something, which is a feeling. But you're stopping it at the watch, or you're stopping it at the car, you're stopping at your favorite tie. No, all these things are giving you a feeling, right? So what we do at Empower is I'd always bring consciousness to that feeling, and I'd make every session about contributing to that feeling. And that feeling was how these folks wanted to feel on their last breath, right? So when you ask what we did at Empower and what was Empower, Empower was an establishment where I utilized sport and physical activity and community and conversations and lowering the waterline of getting everybody comfortable with the most uncomfortable thing in their life, which is the thought of death. And that's kind of what led to, I would say, some of the most amazing success stories, we have with our athletes, our teammates, our entrepreneurs. There's this consistent mentality and mindset that the worst thing in the world really isn't the worst thing in the world.
So what happens to your, kind of your team members when they realize that, they have that realization? What happens next? Because you're training the best of the best, whether it be athletes, entrepreneurs, executives. So these are like highly motivated, highly, in from the outside looking in, we feel like these people are superheroes, right? Like, wow, they just have it all figured out. They got it all dialed in. And I've been outside. I've been at your gym. I've seen very successful people emotionally wrecked walking out because it's not what it appears to be. I think, especially in today's world, like when it comes to young people, like they look at like a CEO of a company and they're like, oh man, I want to be that guy or girl. Like she's got it all figured out. She's whatever. And then when you go home at night and when you self-reflect, you may be a completely different person.
Mm-hmm.
What is once you recognize that death is the only certainty and how you should operate, what happens to these people?
Something really interesting is that, as you say, we say the word successful, and obviously we all define success differently. So for the folks listening in, I think the success that Dee's referring to are these individuals that are very financially stable and financially successful.
Yep.
And a lot of these individuals have made hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. And that money still has never given them that peace they feel after this realization. So when you ask what it is they get from all of this and what happens, is they think they finally, for the first time in their life, get a taste of what freedom feels like. I think that glass ceiling that's over their head gets removed. And I think these individuals also start to realize that there's so much more that they should be responsible for, but have always been able to deflect on like their careers or their work or their commitments on why they can't do these other things. Right? Oh, and like you and I will look at from the outside and be like, holy shit, man, they work so hard. Like what they do is so tough. But what happens with these types of conversations, these game plans, is like you make them realize that it's nice because it looks tough to everybody else from the outside, but you're conditioned for this. It's very easy for you. Now, what's hard for you? And what's actually hard for them is that other part, being honest with myself, right? Trusting myself, believing in myself. And what happens is so much of their life really comes on to like what people say or what people think. That's what they have to hold up. That becomes a struggle. And they're just getting further and further and further away from their truth. And people always ask, like, why are they so angry all the time? Why are they they have everything. It's that piece is missing.
Yeah.
They're not living for them. They got caught up living for you. You see? And what happens is I think it's for the first time in their lives when you have these types of conversations and you make that realization of this very simple truth is that the situation alone of that thought process just removes the finger of whoever has their finger on the trigger, your faith and your destiny, right? Like it's a bit of independence, a bit of freedom. It's the whole, I don't really give a fuck mentality anymore because at the end of the day, I'm the one who's dying and I'm dying alone. So therefore I should do everything I possibly can every day that's going to make that moment of truth when it arrives, feel okay and be safe. Right? So I believe it's just this level of like internal and independence and freedom.
So there's a conversation we've had on this podcast a lot recently. And I think what you're saying kind of echoes that we tell people like, don't worship people you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, just because they're the CEO of some like $50 billion company and you read their autobiography, don't think they've figured out life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think we've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of successful people and it's never more clear. Like you should be you should be looking up to people you actually know personally, and what the perception of these super successful people, you probably know better than anyone that there's a lot of flaws that get masked in just, oh, their stock price went up, 200%, and let's worship them. And we think, obviously we know not to fall into that trap, but I feel like this generation, because of TikTok, Instagram, and everything, they just worship whoever makes the most money. And it's such a like flawed way of kind of.
Yeah. Oh, because look, we were raised differently too, right? Like we were raised differently. So we have that perspective that it's a flaw. This next generation has never been taught that that's a flaw. So my question comes out, is it really a flaw? Right? I mean, everybody kind of has their own perspective on what drives them. And a couple years, 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, fuck thinking like that. Like, don't this, don't that. But at the end of the day, I don't think people will ever actually learn what to respect until they go down these channels and learn for themselves like we did.
Yeah.
And I know how protective, like, influential people like you guys get. And I, hopefully I have a little bit of that with some folks too. But the one thing I'm working really hard on is giving people the permission of kind of going down that, what you and I would consider a flaw, and learn from them for themselves. Because again, like everybody defines success differently.
Sure.
Right. And if and I don't, just because people admire or respect a word or something I say, the one thing I don't want to do, and I'm trying better not to do, is take them away from that experience and that fight, because I care, because I just don't know, get your mind to go this way and go do that. But in the book, for example, as you see, every chapter has one of my teammates that I've coached. I chose 10 different people in this book who are these individuals, right? It's the Marshaws, it's the Tulsi Gabbards, it's the Jed Yorks, the Tom Cables, like these individuals that have kind of made it to the top of their worlds. And why I put them in the book was to actually show this next generation that even these individuals who have made it to the top suffer from the same exact fights you have in your worlds. And what this book hopefully does, it just helps lower the waterline of actually normalizing these mental and emotional deficiencies that are really preventing people from wanting to learn on their own.
Yeah.
What do you hope? Like someone reads the book. Obviously, not everyone will get access to you in their lifetime to spend time, with you at Empower and get to game plan. Like, someone reads the book and, what are some like key takeaways that you can give people where something to start practicing on immediately? Because I think we want to give people something to like, it's almost easier to just be like, hey, cut out sugar. It'll make you feel better. It's almost like we just need to be told to an extent. And what do you hope your book does?
Honestly, it's just one line. I truly hope, and God knows this as was my intention to the book, I'm hoping at the end of this book, everybody understands the freedom they have to create their own narratives. That's all I want everybody to take from this book, is that you have the freedom to create your own narrative. Don't jump on things just because other people are doing them, or it's easier to jump on other things. Like, do that justice, give yourself the permission, and write your own narrative.
And that's both personally, professionally, all of it.
All of it. All of it. Like this is why I believe so many people are so angry. So many people have to, and I know this because so many of my teammates that I've been working with over the years struggle from addiction, struggle from suicidal thoughts, from depression, from anxiety, right? And a lot of this is all because they feel this restriction and this choke on their heart that they can't do things. It's like, well, no, you actually can. No, but I was told that, well, no, you're a grown-ass man. Like, you're not told anything. Like, you can choose how you want to feel about things, right? You could choose how you want to do things. You don't need to run away from the responsibility that comes with being aware of what's preventing you from being content.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what's next? So like people read the book, they kind of like, what do you see in your journey as the next step? Because you're still a young guy, you're obviously, what are you up to professionally? How would you describe what you're doing now today?
So, in parallel to building Empower, about 8-9 years ago, I actually started kind of consulting and advising companies, right? Like what I had the privilege of doing for individuals, which was just kind of getting individuals into this like championship mindset mentality of like what it takes to kind of win their war. I started doing that with organizations, not just individuals. So since the whole pandemic, shut down Empower and shut down our other entity with the whole boxing business, I've just gone full force on the consulting and the creative agency called the We Group. And I've just been working on some really, really, really interesting projects and some really interesting companies, and kind of just getting this mindset and this mentality integrated into these organizations from the start phase of their development. So there's that component that's been professionally extremely fun. And then with this book, I don't know, man, it chokes me up to tell you this, but this book saved my life. It made me face and reflect on things that I've been avoiding my entire life, and kind of deflecting on, doing it more for people, right? Doing things for people and not doing it for myself. And with this pandemic was a massive, massive personal blessing to me, because the community that I was using to not deal with myself, which was the Empower community, it justified why I'd spend 10, 15 days in there so I could have less time alone. Yeah. And this whole pandemic made me realize how bad I was scared of being alone and how terrified I am of silence, right? Like I'm just really scared for my mind to be calm, because I just never looked back. And Seth Davis, who coached me through writing this book as a co-author, he put me through the ringer with this book. It wasn't like, hey, let me talk to you, do some interviews, write this for you, and submit it. It took 19 months because he made me write it. And he made me write it because it was making me dig into everything I was avoiding about myself. And the book is it's my truth, Yeah. And this book is something I found a really obsessive passion over writing now. And I'm hoping to be able to do more and to share more from my experiences and perspective to help solve for people like myself who suffer tremendously from insecurities and suffer tremendously from the responsibility of what being confident means. It made me realize that all the stuff that everybody sees and hypes me up for, with stuff with the fight game and stuff with the National Football League, I'm like, man, that was all an outcome in me actually deflecting off myself.
Yeah. And
I actually got a taste of truth for the first time in my life at 39 years old. All these amazing things, all these things and all these forms of service. This was just me running for myself, man.
So this is the first time you felt you were getting coached through the process of writing? Because you've always been the coach.
This is the first time I was ever honest with myself, Anand.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And this, I wanted to share that here first with you guys. But I've been through a lot with you, with your stuff, and we've talked a lot. And, I have so many beautiful people in my life that depend so much on me to do things. And everybody, why are you so good at what you do? It's like, man, I'm struggling more than anyone I know.
Yeah.
I fight harder than anyone. I have to do this 10 times a day in order to fulfill what you need in an hour. That's how bad my fight is inside. And I never thought it was safe to say that, because I thought people like, oh, he's weak. Like, what do we do? And I realized like, well, no, that's probably why people respect me, is because I'm strong enough to own up to it and admit it and be vulnerable about it. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, this book is going to be the book that's actually going to be the book of showing you that all the opposites that you've been told not to be, not to do, is true power. Because this is what's influencing change. Yeah. This is what's influencing maximization, optimization, unity, championships, grit, right? It's being okay admitting being insecure. It's okay, getting a little choked up because something means something to you. right? And now I've just got this thing, like I really want to spend the next, 10, 15 years having opportunities in a seat at the table to be able to educate this type of ideology, especially with what's happening in society today.
Absolutely. So leave us with some parting words. You're a 24-year-old or 25-year-old man or woman. You're kind of, I now that I'm 41, I look at 20. When I was 25, I thought I was an adult, but you're a child. You're not an adult at 25.
Right.
It takes a lot to become an adult in my eyes, given my life. I mean, I probably became an adult at like 35.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's probably when the first time I felt like an adult. What kind of advice would you give to someone in their 20s that I think, they could take away and be like, okay, how do I get on this journey of kind of, just some sort of like self-realization almost?
Be okay being a student.
Yeah.
Like don't be in no rush of being an adult. Like I just admitted to the world right now, right? I became an adult in the last 19 months when I wrote my book at 39 and gone through all this stuff in life. And I finally realized like everything I've been running from and hiding from and so on actually became my freedom.
Yeah.
Like embracing it finally became my freedom versus fighting it. Right. But it just took, never stop being a student. Be okay not knowing things. Be okay asking for things.
Yeah.
Be okay being the dumbest person in the room. The second you're the smartest person in the room, you stop growing.
Damn it. That's impossible for me.
You're not even the smartest on this podcast. What are you talking about?
That's he has a problem. He has self-realization. He's delusional to think he's the smartest guy in the podcast.
He actually is.
This is amazing. Empower, the book, Conquering the Disease of Fear. Tariq Azim, available where books are sold. Where are books sold today? I mean, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, we're everywhere, huh?
Yeah. Simon & Schuster, Target.
Oh, you're Simon & Schuster, big time.
Yeah, I mean, I never had an intention of writing a book, ever. So that whole story was really interesting, how it all happened, but I'm excited about it. And Simon & Schuster, they're the ones who reached out and asked to elaborate on that feature that Paul Kicks did with ESPN and said, hey, look, I really think there's a book here. And that's how that whole thing began. So it got published by Simon & Schuster, and they've been fantastic with all the media and the publicity and, all that good stuff. So stoked.
So I'll pledge this. So I will buy 20 books to give away to the audience, and just write a reason to the group chat Insta handle of why you want to read the book.
Yeah.
Damn.
That'd be great.
Thank you, my man.
Got you.
D, why are you so quiet?
Because I don't want to read through 20 DMs.
That's not my job. That's Jordan's job. Jordan's coming up with the list. I'm not reading it.
I already know I'm going to get the DM. That's why.
Oh, you guys are the best, man.
Yeah, man, we're really happy for you. Proud of you. Excited for everyone to read the book. What's the best place on social media for people to follow you and get a hold of you?
All I have is Instagram, and it's at Tarek, at TAREQ.
Okay. Wow. Fancy. How'd you get that?
I know the Murthys.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. We're excited. I'm going to read it, start reading the book this weekend. I've not read a book in 15 years, but I will read yours.
God bless your soul, my man. Well, thank you guys again for having me, and to the listeners out there, man. Thank you guys for keeping group chat going, man. This is awesome.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to jump to winners, losers, content. That was too good of an interview to talk about anything else today. So we're going to jump right into winners, losers, content. Anand, who do you have? Winner of the week.
I mean, he keeps winning. It looks like Kanye's headlining Coachella. Those are the rumors, right? Is that official?
I don't know if that's official, but that is Big.
I mean,
Big,
that's
big,
what
big.
I'm seeing on Twitter. I'm seeing on social that the rumors he's headlining.
I mean, the guy has a girlfriend every 3 days. Literally every time I go to Daily Mail, Kanye rumored out with new fling, blah, 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 blah. I'm blown away. His like resurrection in like a matter of months has just been unbelievable. Good for him.
Kim and Pete Davidson were just vacationing in Bahamas. I'm reading on TMZ, so
They look great.
Yeah,
I think they look great. I can't say the same for Tristan Thompson and Khloe Kardashian. Their thing's a little bit of a mess, so I won't speak on their relationship. Well, yeah, I'm happy. I did ask the question in our personal group chat. So Kanye's out on a date every single week. Kim's in the Bahamas. Who's watching the kids?
we know the answer to this. That was the response everyone gave.
Yeah. You don't think
It's called an army of nannies.
You don't think
You
the
think
kids are with Kim and Pete in the Bahamas?
No, there's no pictures of them. It doesn't look
Yeah,
like.
but paparazzis are good about respecting people about their kids.
You think Pete Davidson's waking up at 6 a.m. to give the kids eggs and pancakes?
He looks like an eggs and pancakes guy. All right. Well, I hope they have a good New Year too. All right, my winner of the week, and I'm frankly shocked, but the New York Times bought The Athletic for $550 million in cash. This company loses money like nobody's business. I think it loses like $40-50 million a year.
Do we know if it's a positive outcome for investors?
I don't know.
Because the rumor was supposed to be a fire sale, and they originally wanted $750 million, and ended up at 500. I think they only raised 140, so maybe people came out okay.
Yeah, I'm sure the investors probably made a little money. But here's the thing. I mean, I would say I'm not like the most avid, fanatical sports fan, but I pay attention. I have never been on The Athletic.
Athletic's pretty well known for, you have to be an avid sports fan. It's not for casual. It's basically the equivalent of like, you follow your local team and you want specialized news for that local team. So if you're the biggest, I don't know, Brewers fan in Milwaukee, you're probably not getting a lot of national coverage on the Milwaukee Brewers. But on The Athletic, you can find really specialized content for your team.
So these are for like fanatics.
Yeah, exactly. And they poached a lot of like the local writers from like the LA Times and all these places and put them on The Athletic to be like the beat writer.
Okay. My loser is growth tech stocks.
Oof.
I mean,
Hitting home personally.
yeah. I cannot believe every morning I wake up and Peloton's down.
It's not only Peloton, it's everything.
It's everything, right? So like
including my positions.
Including your positions, including even Amazon's off its highs now. I mean, really great companies like Shopify has got shellacked
Yeah.
the last 30 days. And, you know, when you follow, so two things happened. One was the Federal Reserve says they are going to raise interest rates sooner than later, and that all the spending is going to wrap up pretty soon. So what I'm interested to see with that is that what impact does that actually have on the performance of the companies, or is it just a cycling out? Because like cycling out of those types of equities into safer plays, because interest rates should not affect the performance of Shopify.
No, this is when hedge funds make an absolute killing.
Yeah.
And what's happening is there should be a correction on the stocks that were trading at 50 to 100x revenue, and their growth rates have now compressed.
Yeah.
And the problem is these growth tech stocks get just put in a basket. Yeah. So Vanguard and all these just trade out of all of them at once.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be this certain companies, if you do the research, you do the work, you can make an absolute fortune, because great companies will always be great companies, whether interest rates go up or not. And if you have a 5+ year horizon on some of these companies, you can find some steals right now.
Yeah, it definitely looks like some really great companies have just gotten beaten up for no reason.
50, 60% drawdowns.
Yeah.
And if you look at the S&P, you take out, I think, 5 companies that the market was down.
Yeah.
So you take out Microsoft, Google, Apple. So it's funny how the media also fucks this up too. Everyone thinks the stock market rip. It's 5 companies.
Yeah.
Basically in the last 12 months.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So the Robinhood trader just must have been absolutely obliterated. They're not trading Apple.
No, they've moved on. They're on NFTs.
That's true.
No one's using Robinhood anymore. By the way,
I mean, Robinhood usage has to have fallen off a cliff.
Not only has it fallen off a cliff, the company is only worth $13 billion. I spit on a $13 billion company. That's nothing. $13 billion. Every company, every quarter, there's a $13 billion company. I mean, what is going on? I mean, is Robinhood a good buy? Do we believe? I mean, like, that wasn't that a $50 billion company like 6 weeks ago?
Maybe not 6, but yeah, it was a $50 billion company. But I think what's scary is who the Robinhood user is. It's the same person that's bidding up NFTs.
Yeah.
So that user is so fickle.
Yeah.
It's not interesting to own Datadog anymore. It was 18 months ago.
Yeah. It's interesting. Definitely interesting. I would say crypto, for the most part, the big cryptocurrencies have kind of held their own. They're not down 50%. They're down more like 30%, right?
Still a lot. I mean, Bitcoin's peak was 67K. We were talking like 42,000. It's 33%.
Yeah. I mean,
for
Bitcoin,
a trillion dollar asset. So imagine Apple going down 30% in 6 weeks.
Where's your boy Satoshi? All right. Content recommendation.
Content's obvious. The book, Tariq Azim. Go on Amazon, pre-order it. Can you pre-order it now?
You can. You can.
Perfect.
It's on Tuesday.
Pre-order it. Get it. Learn. And empower yourself.
Yeah. I definitely, I'll, in that same vein, since Tariq is in the martial arts, world, I'm going to recommend a TV show to go alongside that book recommendation, Cobra Kai Season 4. Unbelievable.
I have one last question since Tariq is a martial arts expert. What's the first 2 sentences that come to mind when you hear Jake Paul? You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Well, that was it. I laughed. Okay. No, look, at the end of the day, he does a lot with his character, but the guy puts in the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He trains, he's committed, he busts his ass, he goes out there. There's a lot that goes into all of that, right? Coming in front of this crowd, putting that kind of weight on his shoulders consistently about the expectations he's kind of creating and the hate. Like, I got to give it to him, man. The guy's got some, he's got some balls, but the character is what makes me laugh.
Especially if you think about how many people were rooting for him to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Like pretty much 90% of people until probably his last fight, and he's like 1 people over. Mm-hmm. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it definitely is crazy. It's funny, right? Like it's almost like real WWF now. Like you're really fighting. But it is what it is.
Okay. Good take.
Do we have any shout outs, Jordan?
Yeah, we've got one shout out from Will Percy. He said, I started listening to the pod in 2019 and randomly met Anand and Amanda at a wedding in Napa when I'd only listened to about 10 episodes. Side shout out to Scott Pickett for the intro. Anand was nice enough to give me a shout out after that, and my wife Jennifer and I have listened to every episode since. We tell everyone about the pod and how well it cuts through so much BS in the news. Jen's always been jealous that I got a shout out, and she certainly deserves one now. She gave birth to our son Thomas on November 30th and is now ranked the #1 new mother in the world. Without any sleep, she does everything for him and makes it look easy. Tom and I love you, Jen.
Congratulations. And I do remember the wedding, and it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Congrats. Congrats on the baby. It's exciting. I think that's all we have, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. I'll tell you, I'm pretty well recovered from the Marion, but it's caused a lot of freaking headache in my life. So if you can
Pick up
avoid
any dance moves,
you can if you can avoid a Marion, then you should definitely do that. All right, have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you Sunday. Bye-bye.
peace.